In the dark room, a girl's voice rang out from a small glowing device. She happily introduced herself as Amasaki Nina, a new streamer. She thanked everyone for participating in her first live stream. There are 102 viewers in the chat room. The first comment came from Pepper, expressing excitement when watching her broadcast. Another comment praised her cute voice. The last two comments asked what she would do during this stream, and mentioned that recently there have been many new VTubers appearing, making the market saturated. The boy sat under the blanket in a room lit only by a small screen, his hand scrolling through her stream. A new comment appeared from Ao, saying that this was the first time he saw such a stream and promised to support her from now on. He encouraged Nina to try her best. Nina breathed lightly, surprised to receive a donation from Ao. She asked if he happened to find her live stream among so many other broadcasts. Happy, she expressed her gratitude and thanked him for finding her. Silently, he whispered that he liked her. That day, he fell in love with her. At the store, people were chatting and asking each other if anyone knew him. He stood in front of the counter, while another person answered that it was Miyaki, and they heard he used to be a programmer at a big company. The other person curiously asked why he was now working at a convenience store. The other person replied that Miyaki seemed to have been dumped by his girlfriend, and that shock had caused psychological trauma. They commented that it seems that today's youth cannot work when their hearts are hurt. Miyaki looked at the employees only sign on the door where the noise was coming from. The other person asked him where he heard that information from. He replied that his niece's boyfriend worked at the same company as Miyaki. The other person continued, "He is already 27 years old. It's a pity that his parents are still unmarried and only work part-time at this age." Miyaki recognized them. It was Suzuki and Sato from the early morning religious ceremony. He wondered, couldn't they have waited until I got home before talking about me? He bowed his head, silently admitting that everything they said was true. The girl who broke up with him after 4 years of dating is his senior at the company. That story became a rumor, and he always felt like people were making fun of him. His mood worsened, and he quit work on his doctor's advice. He no longer had the strength to manage daily life, let alone work. I live in a room full of trash. Until he met her. Suddenly, a loud voice called his name. Miyaki recognized it as the store owner, an old woman with a bright smile but no teeth. She happily said, "Look, isn't this what you've been waiting for?" In her hand was a box with posters of girls wearing cat ears. Miyaki asked if he could draw a card. The proprietress, still smiling, said, "Your shift is almost over. Take out a card." He pulled out a card with a QR code and instructions attached. His reward is a Tanapopo Akari keychain. The owner happily asked if that girl was the one Miyaki liked. He shook his head and said, "No, I don't know her very well. The person I like is Amasaki Nina," he added. A VTuber launched this year. With her cheerful, natural way of speaking, Nina quickly won a lot of love, and her popularity on social networks is increasing. For Miyaki, it was thanks to her that he recovered enough to work part-time again. He looked at the keychain in his hand, a plump cartoon version of her looking back at him. In the end, Miyaki kept drawing cards until Nina appeared on one, even though he had spent all his money for the month. The rent still hasn't been paid, and he figured he might have to delay water payments. As I walked through the park, he saw her again. The girl with long hair was still sitting on a stone bench. He wondered if she was a student and why she didn't go to school during the day. Half joking, half serious, he thought. Maybe she ran away from home. The girl turned her head towards where he had just been standing, but Miyaki had already quietly left. He breathed a sigh of relief, thinking he had escaped a dangerous situation. If he accidentally looked into the eyes of a young girl like that, he would definitely be considered a pervert. Even though he had no bad intentions, he knew that in the eyes of others, he would be found guilty without doing anything wrong. He remembered the feeling of people looking at him with cruel, mocking smiles. Suddenly, a sweet female voice called him from behind. With a tired expression, he turned back. And then there are the familiar bright eyes and buck-toothed smile. The girl gave him Nina's keychain and said, "You drop this." Miyaki panicked as soon as he saw her, thinking that this situation couldn't get any worse. With a mischievous smile, she teased, "Is it wrong for me to pick it up? Especially since I'm the one who found it," he stammered, saying it was his and apologizing for disturbing her. After that, he quickly thanked her and hurried away. The girl looked after him, looking a bit confused. Miyaki wondered if she realized he was looking at her before. If she realized, this situation would get even worse. When he finally reached the door, he rummaged in his pocket for his keys. Standing in front of the door for a long time, he worriedly thought he had lost his key. Taking out his phone, he decided to call the house management company, but of course, his phone ran out of battery. The familiar voice rang out from behind again. She asked him if he was having trouble. He turned around and saw her standing just outside the wall of his apartment. She looked at him curiously. He looked at her with a worried expression. The two sat on chairs on the sidewalk when he called to ask for help about his apartment situation. He handed the phone back and thanked her without daring to look her in the eye. She said it was okay and took the phone back. He mumbled a small goodbye and started to leave. But she called back, asking if he was planning to leave right away. She pointed out that he still had time before the management company's people arrived. She invited him to stay and be her conversation partner. He turned to look at her, but immediately looked away with a worried expression. Seeing that he still hadn't left, she told him to do so as a thank you for borrowing her phone. Finally, he sat down and said that she had recently appeared in this area. On this occasion, he asked her if she had run away from home. She replied that he guessed right. She had an argument with her parents. He thought to himself, from this, it seemed like she didn't realize he was looking at her before, which made him breathe a sigh of relief. She said that at first she just killed time at internet bars or karaoke, but at night those places were noisy. Then she turned to him and said, instead of talking about it, she called him Oni-san and asked if he liked VTubers. He was surprised when she mentioned it, that the previous rubber keychain was part of the number 100 lottery card series that had just been released today. She teased him for looking like the type of person who liked anime and the like. He replied that he actually doesn't watch much anime. She was surprised and asked if that was true. He said he didn't know much about VTubers, except for that girl in the keychain. He said that the girl's name was Nina. You say Nina is special. He went on to say that he once dated someone. He respects her because she's a senior and colleague at the company. I tried to work hard to become someone worthy of her, but in the end, she betrayed him. She had an affair with a superior in the company and they broke up. The next day, when he arrived at the company, rumors about the affair spread everywhere, but were told in the opposite direction. Everyone rumored that he was the one who betrayed her and hurt her. He said that although he tried to explain the truth, no one believed him. They all said that his senior was betrayed, and they were sure that he was the one who hurt her. Rumors spread that Miyaki had an affair and hurt Senpai. He said that since the breakup, many things in his life have collapsed, including his job, just because she left him. He then quickly apologized for telling such a dark story, but she said it was okay. His cheeks turned red, and he wondered, why do you feel so comfortable talking to her? He continued to say that at that time, he watched Nina's live stream. Seeing her happy and working hard, despite being criticized by negative comments, encouraged him. Thanks to that, he was recently able to start working part-time. Maybe he would feel the same way about other streamers, but since the person who saved him at that time was Nina, so she is special to you. He said that even so, he is still afraid of communicating with others. He describes himself as a hikikomori, who avoids society. He looked at the keychain in his hand with affectionate eyes and said that he thought it would be great if one day he could smile in front of everyone like Nina is now. He was working a part-time job at a convenience store, but if he could become like that, he felt like he would be able to do his old job again and try his best again. The girl looked at him with sadness, but still encouraged him that he could definitely do it. He bowed his head, smiled, and said he really hoped so. He said that people like him are laughable. He thinks streaming is just entertainment, not worth being saved by it. But she interrupted and said that it was not a game. He looked at her with surprise. She went on to say that she thinks there are many streamers with different perspectives. However, there are also people who really consider streaming a serious business. She said that streamers always think about content so they can have fun with the audience. They even worry about building a character image that doesn't overlap with other personas. They do it out of passion, but because it's all serious. She advised him not to say that they were just playing. He was about to say something, but was interrupted when a voice rang out announcing that they were from the building management company Mini Home. He quickly bowed, thanked her for everything, and hurriedly left. The manager gave him a spare key and told him to be more careful from now on. He stood in front of the door, thinking about the girl from before who seemed a bit angry while talking. He opened the door, telling himself that he was definitely not good at communicating with girls in real life. When the door opened, his messy apartment appeared before his eyes. He tiredly jumped onto the bed, where there was a pillow with a picture of Nina. With Nina, he wouldn't feel like this. He thought that if he was with Nina, he would just watch a stream and leave a comment. Sometimes Nina will reply to one of his comments, and that's it. He recalls the text message that they broke up and that she had expected more from Ao, but was disappointed. He thought that in reality, he wouldn't get hurt over such small things. At night, he woke up while hugging Nina's pillow. He thought about sleeping in a strange position and felt uncomfortable. His stomach growled, causing him to stop for a moment. On the way home with a bag of food in hand, he suddenly thought about the girl from before. It's already this late. He looked towards the familiar park and thought to himself that perhaps she was no longer there. But then he saw her. He started looking around, not knowing what to do. He remembered that he needed to thank her for her help earlier, but also remembered that she seemed angry at the end of the conversation. He wondered if he should bother anymore. But then he saw a man approaching her. He worriedly realized that she was not alone, and the man seemed to be scolding her. He thought maybe they were arguing and bowed his head, smiling bitterly, deciding that it was best not to interfere. But then the girl turned her head towards him, screamed that he has arrived, and she is waiting for him. She waved at him loudly and said he was late. He wondered if she was saying all that to him. Then she turned back to the man behind her, made a victory sign, and said he was her boyfriend, so she would go now. But the man refused to let go, put his hand on her shoulder, and shouted that there was no way he was her boyfriend. She got angry and asked him what he was doing, but instead of letting go, he told her not to try to run away, but to come to him. Miyaki witnessed it all from afar. The girl asked him to let go, but the man said she had nowhere to go, and only said that because he wanted her good. She replied that she would handle this herself. He turned away, hesitant, thinking that now was the time to act while they were distracted. Miyaki wondered if it was really okay to leave like that, as he heard them continuing to argue. He thought bitterly that in the end he was just avoiding things he didn't like always. She even listened to someone like him and answered like that. He remembered when he had told her that he thought it would be great if one day he could smile happily in front of everyone, like Nina. She told him that he could definitely do it. That sentence made him stop. He clenched his fist and said loudly to the man. He thought she seemed to hate what he was doing. But the tough man replied that, of course, that was not the case. Miyaki says that's clearly what's happening. The angry man grabbed Miyaki's collar and asked him what he just said. Miyaki awkwardly raised his hand, saying he wasn't the one who said that. The man said he was causing a nuisance and asked what he was trying to achieve here. Miyaki finally blurted out that being beaten by people who looked strong was his hobby. He said he just happened to see the other man while passing by and really wanted to be beaten. He held out his hand while the man stammered and asked what he was saying. Miyaki told him to hurry up and hit him, begging him to hit him. The man felt strange with his action, shouted at Miyaki to stop and not to come closer. Finally, he threw Miyaki to the ground, shouting at him to stay away. Miyaki cried out in pain and watched the man leave, thinking he had chased him away. He felt so pathetic. The girl worriedly asked him if he was okay, and explained that the other man had started a conversation with her from somewhere. She's sorry for dragging him into this trouble. But Miyaki said that he was the one who should apologize. She looked at him and asked if anything had happened before. He said he thought he might have upset her earlier. She said that wasn't the case, but he still insisted that he should apologize. Suddenly, she said that she would stay at his house because she was afraid that the other person would come back. That made him stop, stammering that it might be too much. She smiled apologetically, took out her phone, and said she was just guessing. He wondered if she was teasing him. She said honestly that she was glad he was here at that time. She said she was in trouble, and the place was dark. She was happy to see him because she thought no one would find her. She thanked him with a bright smile. His eyes widened, and he told himself that he never imagined this would happen. He wondered why he didn't realize this sooner. That in real life, he will love her too. His face turned red as he whispered that she was Amasaki Nina. She looked up at him in confusion when he said that she was Amasaki Nina. She asked why he thought she was Nina, making him wonder what he was saying. He thought it was impossible to meet the person behind the character Nina in a place like this. He stammered that it was because of her voice. She touched his chin as he continued to speak, perhaps because of the way she spoke, and also because she gave off the same feeling. She closed her eyes, saying seriously that he had found out so easily. She said she would be more careful from now on. He silently shouted in his head that he was right. He wondered if she always admitted things so easily. She went on to say that he was a fan of Nina, so this must have ruined her image in his eyes. She apologizes for what just happened, while he still sits on the ground, asking if she won't deny it. He thought to himself, shouldn't VTubers be worried about personal information being leaked online? She said that she wasn't confident enough to hide it skillfully, and she thought that being honest was better than telling a bad lie. She asked him not to tell anyone about this. He quickly told her not to worry, and that she could rest, assured that he wouldn't tell anyone. She bent down in front of him, breathing a sigh of relief. She held out her hand and said that what happened today would be a secret just between the two of them. She raised her pinky finger and asked them to promise each other. He wrapped his pinky finger around hers, thinking that this action was very similar to Nina's. She whispered, "This is a pinky promise." She turned away and said she could leave in peace now, but he called her back, asked her that since she had left home, did she have anywhere to go? She smiled and replied that if she had, she wouldn't be here. She said she would manage on her own. She then asked him to join another stream of hers next time. He thought he had actually met the person behind Nina. When she heard him falter, she turned to look at him. Finally, he said that going out at this hour could be dangerous because it was late. He suggested that if she didn't mind, she could stay with him tonight. She nodded, and then she found herself sitting on the floor with a Nina-shaped pillow next to her. She mutters that he really likes Nina. She looked at the paper in her hand. It was the personal contact information that Miyaki had given her. You said that was your name and contact number. Told her to contact him if anything happened. He also said that she can freely use everything in this apartment. When she left, she simply left the door open and walked away. She asked him if he was going anywhere. He sheepishly scratched his head and said that he didn't think she would feel comfortable if he stayed, so he planned to go to the internet cafe. But she said this is his house. He doesn't need to worry about her. Before leaving, he said it was okay. He would be back before noon. She slept on a body pillow and wondered if Miyaki was the correct pronunciation of his name. She smiled, thinking that he was really a good person. Miyaki is at the internet and manga shop. He thought he had gone overboard when he invited her to stay at his house, but he wondered if everything would be okay. They're not together anyway, so it should be fine. He thought he only invited her to stay after finding out she was Nina, and wondered if that would make him look bad. But he thought, since strange guys like that one might be wandering around here, he couldn't leave her alone. He'd leaned back in his chair, thinking that this situation was quite serious, so there was no other way but to let her stay. However, he thought maybe he shouldn't ask if she was Nina or not. But that doesn't change the fact that Nina is very special to him. He closed his eyes, telling himself that he didn't want to meet the real person behind Nina. So after you leave tomorrow, he decided to forget about meeting her. After that, he returned to the hotel. At 11:32, he stood in front of the room door, wondering if she's still there. When he turned the doorknob and realized it was locked, he opened the door and found Nina in the kitchen, her hair tied into two tails. She welcomed him home with a warm smile. He asked why she was still here, repeating that he said this was just a temporary place to stay for one night. She replied that she thought it would not be right to leave so soon after what he had done for her. She said that even if she went, she would have nowhere to go. But he pointed out that she had stayed longer than originally planned. She interrupted him, placing the plate of food in front of him, and happily suggested that they should eat together. He asked again, "What is this?" Component placement. But this time, he sat down on the floor with her. She explained that this is a dish she makes by frying cup noodles and rice. She changed the subject and asked why there was no dining table in his house. He apologized about that and tried a spoonful. He wondered if this was soba and rice cooked together, but then his face softened when he realized the rather surprising taste. She asked if the food was good, and he replied that it was actually quite good. She happily said that she was happy that he liked the food, which reminded him that it had been a long time since he had eaten with anyone. He felt quite happy about that. Furthermore, he wondered how long it had been since anyone welcomed him home. She shyly twiddled her finger in front of his face and said that there was something she wanted to say since they talked before he left. She calls him Ao-san and asks if he can let her stay for a bit. He immediately spit out the food and asked again what she just called him. She says Ao-san is short for Aoba-san and asks if he doesn't like that name. He breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking she had discovered his username, she turned around and asked him whose computer it was. He said it was his computer. She said she had free time in the evening, so she tried editing the previous livestream into short videos. He asked if it was Nina's livestream. She replied that he was right, but admitted that she was not good with computers, so she failed and couldn't recover. She wondered if she should pause editing the next livestream. He cried out when he heard that and asked her to let him take a look. She didn't object and let him type on her laptop. He asked if she corrupted the data here. Her eyes widened when she saw him checking the data accurately. He stroked his long hair and asked, "Can we take a closer look at this data?" She let him continue working, and after a moment, he said he probably restored the original livestream. She exclaimed that he really did it. It was amazing. She said she wanted to insert a thumbnail here. He replied that he understood. He looked at the screen and asked, "Is this okay?" She asked if he could do that. He replied, "Of course." She mentioned that the sound in the other video was quite distorted. He said if she wanted to fix it, she should get a better computer. She asked if he couldn't fix it right away. He insisted that he could, and asked her to wait a bit. She looked at him, surprised and wondering, is he really an extremely talented person? She asked him if he had done work related to this before. He looked at her suspiciously and said that video editing was not his expertise, but he worked as a programmer at his old company. She asked if he knew much about these things. He replied that he thought he knew a little more than the average person. She told him to wait a moment, then turned around, 3 thick bills in hand. He looked at her with caution when she told him to accept the money. She said it was a video editing fee and she was paying him. She insisted that she would definitely pay him, then said that she wanted him to do other things. She announced that she wanted to hire him. She said she wanted to hire him, and if it was editing work, she could let her company or office do it. She muttered that it wasn't impossible, but she explained that the current situation was quite complicated and would be very difficult. She said it was risky to ask someone she didn't know like that. She said he knew about her identity and many other things. So she asked him to help her with Nina's live streams. He still felt uneasy, so she said that if he was worried about money, she could pay him in full. She also has another favor to ask him. He still felt uneasy, so she said that if he was worried about money, she could pay him in full. She also has another favor to ask him. She bowed her head, saying that of course she would pay the rent and living expenses. She pleaded that she was having difficulty, and that if this situation continued, she would no longer be able to continue live streaming. He said he would answer her requests one by one. She was immediately delighted and obediently said yes. He started saying that first, if she didn't mind, he would help her with the live streams. But he cannot receive this money. He pushed the money towards her and said that this money was probably from the income or donation she received from the live stream. He said from the perspective of a fan who regularly donates to Nina's live streams, he thought it wouldn't be right for someone not part of the management team to receive that money. So, as a fan of Nina, he will return this money to her. She replied that the money was not from donations, causing him to look at her suspiciously. She explained that it was the salary the company paid her, separate from the money she received from fans. He objected, saying that even if it was a salary, it was still not right. But she said she didn't just want to give him money. She honestly said that she was just asking someone to broadcast his work and pay him for it. That's all. She explained that this was payment for work related to live streaming. She says that if he doesn't do this, she has no one else to turn to. He agreed to do it and said that what she said seemed reasonable. Her face lit up when she heard that. He added that there was one last issue, her staying. He bluntly said that it was impossible and that she could not stay. Her face immediately turned into surprise. She grabbed his shoulder and cried, "Why not?" She reminds him that he let her stay last night. He said as he thought, living together was impossible. She yells that they won't live together, but he explains that for most Japanese people, living with the opposite sex has emotional connotations. Her face immediately turned into surprise. She lay down on top of him and pleaded, "Say it as helping Nina." He echoed that thought, that helping her was like helping Nina. The person Nina saved can now help her in return. "Okay," he said. Then her face lit up again. But he said there was one condition. He said she ran away from home after arguing with her parents, and he suggested they work together to resolve the issue. He said if she'd agreed, he would listen to her story and see how he could help. She looked around nervously, and he reassured her that he wasn't asking her to tell right away. However, he said that if he felt she had no intention of resolving this matter, he would ask her to leave. She nodded in agreement and thanked him. She said she was really struggling. She also said maybe she should go back to school. He agreed, saying it was better for her to go back to school. She added that, by the way, she had kept her uniform in her bag the whole time, so it was wrinkled. He turned to look at her when he heard the word uniform. She said naturally that she would wash it in the washing machine. He turned around and asked in surprise, What uniform? What uniform? How from is that? She pulled up her checkered dress and said, "This is it." He looked at her with a horrified expression when she said it was just a normal high school uniform. He hesitantly asked, "Are you a high school student?" He immediately told her to forget everything he just said. She mumbled to him not to react like that. He exclaimed that high school students absolutely could not stay at his house. He shouted that that would make him a criminal. She replied that even though he said so, she had already stayed at his house last night, so it was too late now. He looked at her in shock, saying he wasn't home last night, but she emphasized that a high school student had stayed at his house. He sighed in panic as consciousness slowly returned. She put her hand on her chin and wondered what would happen if she was caught by the police and put under guard after being chased away. She said that if the police asked her many questions, she would be forced to say that she had been at his house. She wondered what the police would think of him when they heard that. He shouted, asking her to wait a moment. She looked at him triumphantly and asked if he would allow her to stay. He could only look at her with worry as she continues to persuade him to let her stay. Finally, he asked helplessly, "Do you really have no other choice?" She said she had thought about it and asked if his long hair was a hindrance. She asked him if he was trying to grow his hair long. He replied that cutting his hair was quite troublesome, so he didn't cut it. She excitedly said that she would cut his hair. He asked her if she really knew how to cut hair. She replied that she had never cut anyone's hair, but she had cut her hair and other things. She waved the scissors in front of his face and said it would be okay. He panicked, but she just smiled and said she would make him look better. He tried to tell her to stop for a moment, but she didn't pay attention. Finally, he realized he was sitting in a barber shop while the barber was fixing his hair. He thanked the barber for his hard work and looked in the mirror. He looked at himself, wondering why he was like this. His hair is shorter now, and his eyes look clearer. At this time, Nina was waiting for him outside the door and asked if he was done. She complimented him on how amazing he looked. She apologizes for ruining his hair, but says it's really beautiful. She tells him to look at the clothes she just bought and asks him to come with her. He raised his head innocently and asked, "Where are we going?" She shouted happily, "We'll go on a date." He was stunned, but still followed her. She said that since she was going to stay at Ao's house, she needed to buy a few things, including change of clothes. He quietly followed her from behind. She turned around and asked if he was listening. Noticing the distance between them, she wondered why he was so far away. He turned away and said it would be illegal to go too close. She asked, "Are you still thinking about that?" She said that he looked suspicious walking so far away, and that he would look more handsome than suspicious if he walked near her. But he insisted that it was impossible. Walking so close would look like he was watching her. She seemed a bit confused and said she didn't think so. She thought they could hold hands or something. He exclaimed in surprise, but she quickly changed the subject and told him not to go too far but to come closer. Suddenly, someone called Miyake's name, gently saying sorry to attract his attention. Miyake turned around and saw a policeman adjusting his hat and asked if he had a moment. Miyake worriedly thought it was over, but the police showed him a small worn teddy bear with buttons for eyes and asked if it was his. He said he found it on the ground. Nina said it was hers and thanked the police. The police replied that it was nothing. The police left calmly, and Nina told Miyake to look, saying everything was okay. She smiled brightly at him and asked him to come with her. His cheeks suddenly turned red, and he thought that this had happened yesterday. She pulled him away, and now he's doing things he wouldn't normally imagine. He didn't feel too bad, but for some reason, he asked her if there was anything else she needed to buy. She made a sound like she was thinking. A stranger called Miyake's name, and he immediately tensed up. The stranger noticed it and said he was selling magazines. Miyake wondered if this was the first time he had done so. Thinking back, he realized he had never gone out since leaving the company. He thought that even if he went out, he would be too tired and not want to interact with others, and his only joy would be watching Nina's live stream. Everything else is boring. But then he saw Nina in her normal school clothes and saw an image of Nina from the live stream standing there, looking at him. He grabbed his face, where the red color started to spread. He wondered what Nina was doing to him in her head. Suddenly, Nina ran at him and called him her boyfriend. She apologizes for keeping him waiting, and he stammers out that he's not her boyfriend or anything. But she cheerfully asked if he was sure, then suggested they begin. She's sorry for making him go through all of this. But instead of accepting, he thanked her. She looked at him with surprise. He stroked his newly cut hair between his fingers and said that today was really fun, and things like this weren't bad at all. He smiled at her and said he was glad she brought him along today. She responded with a smile. She pointed out that he didn't have a desk at home and asked if it would be okay if she bought him one. He asked if she was okay with that and asked if she needed to buy a futon. She looked at him strangely, and he explained that he only had one futon. She exclaimed, "What? All their noise attracts someone's attention." This person looked up from the phone and saw her laughing about something. He recognized her and wondered if it was Shiraishi. Nina, one of the live streamers, greeted everyone. "Long time no see." She said that this is Amasaki Nina. She said her computer was broken and she couldn't live stream. There were many comments asking if she'd fixed her computer yet. Coco commented that the live stream was late, while others pointed out technical issues such as her microphone having no sound. Another told her to relax. Nina reads all that and says her computer hasn't been fixed yet, so she's using her laptop. Another comment wrote excitedly that she was finally live streaming. Another wrote that they could help fix her computer. She said that she actually planned to only live stream when she got a new computer, but she missed everyone so much. On a bench in the park, Miyaki covered his face with his hands, emotions welling up in his heart. He wanted to scream that he loved her and that he also missed her very much. Her voice came from the phone, saying she would end the live stream soon, although it seemed impossible with this laptop. In the room, Nina reads the comments. One person asks if the computer in heaven can be broken. Nina replies that she uses a human computer because she's a human sent to heaven. Another person commented that they had never heard of such a setup. She told him not to call it a setup because that was on the official website. The comment section suddenly became interesting when one commenter laughed that she was promoting the website. LOL. Another person told her that she had fallen. The next person tried to defend her, saying that she said that during the launch livestream and they didn't know at the time. Another comment said they would go check, but she still smiled and said they would update them on future plans. Aosan donated 100 yen and wrote that he was happy to see Nina livestream and said that it had been a long time since she did a livestream. Then, when he comes home, she welcomes him. She apologized for making him leave during the livestream. She said live streaming on this laptop is difficult. He replied that it was okay and asked if his voice could be heard. He said in a serious voice that if Nina's livestream had problems, he would not be able to forgive himself. She laughed and said he was so serious. It was funny. But by the way, he asked if she was okay with the livestream schedule. She scrolled through her phone and said that she told her manager that her computer was broken, so she had to stream less. She said she couldn't tell them that she had run away from home. She told him that there was a person named Aosan in the previous livestream. He jokingly asked if it was him, and thought he had donated as usual. She replied that it was his screen name, but then he argued that there could have been someone else with the same name in her livestream. She asked if that was really possible. She confirms that it is definitely Aosan. She said that he has been commenting and doing all sorts of things since her debut livestream. And today he donated and said he was happy to watch her livestream. He tensed as she continued to say that he talked like Miyaki, and that he couldn't live without Nina's livestream, or that the computer definitely couldn't handle Nina's cuteness or something similar. He quickly covered his face with both hands to hide his embarrassment and told her that it was him and asked her to forgive him. She asked why forgive him. He replied that it was because of everything. She exclaimed that it was crazy and said that it was fate. He looked at her with shock. She said that's because not everyone has the opportunity to meet such a viewer. She felt it was a destiny. She also complained that she easily admitted she was Nina when they first met. She said she thought about her fans' feelings and wondered if she should lie, but now it's too late to do that. She apologizes to him for this. He told her that she only said that because he asked in the first place, so she didn't need to apologize. He said he was surprised and shouldn't have been, but he asked who was behind the screen anyway, Nina was still Nina to him. He sat next to her and, with a constant smile, he affirmed that Nina was very special to him. She called his name and then boldly asked if he was in love. He raised his hands defensively and stammered that he really liked Nina, but he was talking about the virtual Nina. He said it wasn't that he was in love or wanted a relationship. It was simply that Nina was very special to him. He argued that saying he wanted to be with Nina was ridiculous. She patted her cheek and said, "For example, if Nina had a boyfriend, would you hate it?" He hesitantly answered,
But in the end said she was talking about the person behind Nina.
She agrees that he is right. He turned away and replied vaguely that, in that case, he didn't care and that it was a private matter. Instead, he said they should keep it a secret. He said he wanted everyone to have their own space. However, he suspected that not everyone thought like him. He looked down and said that's why he thought she should keep it a secret from her audience. Then he turned around and shouted that it was just his opinion. She laughed and said she knew he would say that. He asked her if there was someone like that. She playfully replied that she was just giving an example. He accepted that answer. However, her face turned sad when he wasn't present. As she looked at the conversations on the phone, the person was asking when they could meet and insisted that if she didn't come to school, it was okay, but she should call them. Nina sat in the corner of the classroom, thinking this was terrible. She had no one to talk to. But she told herself that even though the class had just changed, she still hadn't gone to school. She wondered why she couldn't talk to everyone in class, when she could do it easily via live stream. Suddenly, a voice called Shiraishi's name. Two girls stood there asking if she had a moment. In her head, she silently screamed that they were talking to her. She happily asked what was going on, but they immediately got to the point and asked what her relationship with Yaotome was. She stopped and said that Mei and she had known each other for a long time. The two girls were surprised. One of them said that she called Yaotome by her real name. She realized that was exactly what they wanted to know. However, a guy approached them and asked if they were talking about him. Yaotome tilted his head and threatened that if they had anything to do with him, to meet him in person. The two girls were embarrassed, but still left. Say nothing mattered. He sighed as if he had just done the most boring thing, and tells Shiraishi that it's funny that she still has no friends. She shouted that it was her fault. He asked why it was like that. She says it's because Mei-kun stole all the girls' hearts. He frankly replied that he didn't understand what she was saying, but he said it was okay because she still had him. She looked at him as he stood confidently beside her. He asked her what she was doing, skipping school. He said he texted her, but she ignored him. She apologized and said she wasn't home yet, so she was busy. He asked if she was okay. She replied that she was staying with an acquaintance, but that she was fine. He looked at her with surprise and said that this reminded him. Asked if she went shopping in front of the station last week. She hesitantly replied that it was probably her. He asked her if she was with a guy, but she replied that he was wrong. She went alone. He called her Shiraishi and said that it was her with a boy, his face showing a mischievous smile. Meanwhile, Miyaki is in his apartment. He looked at the boxes stacked in the room and wondered what he was supposed to do with all this. Shiraishi had told him that she wanted to order some items and would have them delivered here. He didn't expect things to appear like this. He wondered what was going on. He looked at the invoice and read that it was computer equipment. Excited, he wondered if it was an item for Nina to livestream. He smiled and thought that maybe this was the last dish. Now he wondered if she could livestream with all this. Then he realized that the device was too much. He exclaims that she is ready to settle down with all this. He said out loud that it was time. He asked her why she left the house. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, and he wondered if it was her. He opened the door and saw her looking at him worriedly. Confused, he picked her up. She said she was home but needed to talk to him. He replied that he also needed to tell her, but she loudly said that could be done later. She's in a hurry, and a voice rang out from behind her, calling Shiraishi's name. He looked at her as she turned away. He thought a lot in his head. Yaotome stepped up and said, as he thought. He looked at Miyaki and said that it was the person Shiraishi was with the other day. He asked Shiraishi what was really going on. Miyaki looked at the two high school students standing in front of him. He wondered who this person was, and what was really going on here. He looked back and forth between them. Yaotome suddenly turned to look at him, and asked who Miyaki was. Yaotome looked at Miyaki with angry eyes, and asked if they were living together. Miyaki silently exclaimed in his mind that this person was scary. Yaotome suddenly pulled Shiraishi close and said that he was her boyfriend. Even Shiraishi was surprised by that, but Miyaki didn't pay attention as he repeated what he had just heard. Nina's boyfriend? He thought it was private, but in his mind he argued that she was Nina, and he knew it. He felt confused, unable to think clearly, but then he heard Shiraishi scream that that wasn't right. She tells Mei not to say strange things. The lake is frozen, she said. She apologized to him and said Yaotome was her childhood friend, and Mei said that without asking permission. She explains that she told him yesterday. She said she didn't have a boyfriend, and she wasn't lying. Yaotome called Tsukasa and asked, "Is this a crime?" He asked Miyaki if he realized that she was underage. He said it was illegal to bring an underage person home, then put the phone to his ear and said that if so, he would call the police. Miyaki stiffened, thinking that this was his death sentence, but Shiraishi told him to wait a moment and asked him to follow her, saying they needed to talk. She apologized to Miyaki again and said they would talk later. She then left, leaving behind a surprised Miyaki. At the park, Shiraishi tries to convince Yaotome. She said she only asked him to let her stay and not blame Aosan for this, but Yaotome replied that it was impossible and said that she should go find him first. He also said that she could come to his house instead. She thought about going to Meikun's house, but said she would bother his mother. However, he reasoned, what if he did something to her? She screams that Aosan is not that kind of person. She said she never had trouble with him. Yaotome insisted that Aosan was waiting for an opportunity to catch her off guard, but she replied that Aosan never asked her name. She looked at him skeptically and said she only gave her contact information. But Aosan still kept his distance. She says that she will eventually leave Aosan's house because she believes he's trying not to get too involved. So she sincerely told him that Aosan was okay. Yaotome was silent for a few minutes, then said he was going home. Before leaving, he turned around and said that if anything happened, please notify him immediately. Leaving the park, he wondered why she said everything was fine. He turned his head and thought it was impossible, wondering if she liked Aosan. She arrived at Miyaki's apartment and immediately apologized for what happened earlier. But she saw him curled into a ball. She said that she talked to Meikun about this matter. She asked if he was okay. He raised his head and said he had thought about turning himself in before being reported to the police. Shiraishi yells that she won't report him. She said it was because she ordered too many items. He stood up, rubbed his head, and asked about the person from before, Meikun, if he was back yet. She smiled brightly and said that Meikun really wanted a girlfriend. She bet he was surprised. She said she was asked 5 times. He exclaimed in surprise, 5 times? But she said she refused each time. She said she thought she might accept, but what she loves most is live streaming. She reminded him not to tell Meikun about her live stream. She also said Meikun said she could stay at his house, but Meikun lives with his mother and it's difficult. She says, why bother them? She can't even live stream. Then she guessed that she had bothered him and whispered a small apology. He said it was still not a good idea for her to stay at his house, but that doesn't mean she has to leave. He says the problem is she can't go home now. He sat down next to her, looked her straight in the eye, and said that was the reason. He asked if she could at least tell him why she left. She asked him what he wanted to know, and he replied that he just knew she had an argument with her parents. Instead of answering, she asked him if he was hungry or if he had eaten anything. He said no, and firmly asked her if she didn't want to hear this serious matter. He said he was serious. She just smiled and said it was a good idea to eat something while talking about something important. She posed smartly and told him to eat later. She replied that this was a family restaurant and they felt uncomfortable. He thought to himself, would it be better to eat at home? She says this place is private. You can order. And she can sing. She exclaimed that this was the most amazing thing. She picked up the device and he looked at her, asking if she was going to sing. She replied that he was already here, so why didn't she sing? She asked him if he wanted to hear Nina sing. Without hesitation, he replied that he wanted to hear. Then he muttered in his heart, thinking that they shouldn't talk about this anymore. He reiterated that he was trying to be serious here. You said you knew talking about it probably wouldn't change anything, but if there's anything I can do, I want to do it. He told her to tell him. She bowed her head and said it wasn't that she didn't want to talk, but there is an order in things like this. He muttered, but she interrupted and asked if he was going to ask her real name instead. He raised his hands as if to protect himself, saying he had no intention of asking that. She asked if that was how he felt, but then said he would still ask why she left home. She rested her chin on her hand and said that, if so, he should also ask her name. She said she knew Ao wouldn't spread rumors, but he said she was from Talbum. She tells him that the online Nina is actually Shiraishi. He asked if her real name was also Nina. She replied that her name uses kanji. She said that when deciding on a name, she wanted to choose a name that would be easy to hide if her real name was accidentally revealed. He laughed. She asked why he was smiling. He replied that when she made a big deal out of this, he thought it would be completely different. She leaned forward, placing her hands on the table. She said that she really liked Ao's smiling face. His cheeks turned slightly red. When she said that the first time she met him, he looked like he was about to die, but he still smiled and talked about Nina, even laughed with her. Not only Nina, she expressed her joy. Then she stood up and suggested he cut his hair, asking why he couldn't show his face a little. She lifted his hair and told him she liked him as he parted his hair. She asked him if something was wrong. Then shyly said she didn't mean it that way. He smiled slightly and said he knew. He put his hand to his lips, thinking he understood what she wanted to say. The two sat in silence after that, and he suggested that after she finished eating, they should go home. She agreed with him. Then when they walked together, Shiraishi suddenly said that they were just eating and talking about names. Then she said this was the first time she went to karaoke without singing. Miyaki stood still. He remembered that he wanted to hear her sing. She apologized, saying that she had not sung directly for him yet. He still replied that it was okay, and said that it was not something he usually had the opportunity to do. But she reminded him that he said he wanted to listen. He tried to calm down and told himself that he actually wanted to hear her sing. Maybe he'll never have that chance again. She said she also wanted to sing, then tilted his head playfully and said that then they should go home. He looked at her when she said it looked like it was going to rain, so they should hurry. He wondered how long she would stay, but I think if it's just a little more time, it's okay. Shiraishi looked at the thermometer in her hand, which read 38.5 degrees Celsius, and said that, as she had predicted, he is really sick. Miyaki lay on the futon with a Nina-shaped body pillow next to her, but outside the blanket. She asked him if he felt okay, then mentioned that it started raining on their way back from karaoke, and they both got wet.
He weakly apologized through his feverish coma.
She put her hands on her hips and said there was no medicine here, asking if he could wait until the pharmacy opened, but he said it was okay, she should prioritize studying. More importantly, he called her Shiraishi, and she wondered why he used her last name. She said he could call her Nina. He talked about her friend's story at that time, but she waved her hand and said that Mai-kun was just trying to show off. She tells him not to worry about him. Then she asked him what he needed. He asked if she could stay at the internet cafe or somewhere else today. She looked at him with curious eyes. He replied that he did not want the cold to affect Nina's livestream. She laughed and asked if it wasn't too late for that. Furthermore, she hadn't set up the device to livestream yet, so she couldn't do anything. He said it's okay. She called his name, but there was no response. Then asked if he was asleep yet. She lifted his hair from his forehead and realized he had a high fever. Worried, she wondered if it was safe to leave him home alone, but muttered that she had to go to school. She asked, even though he was fast asleep, if he was okay while she was away. She looked at her phone, saw it was 7:58, and exclaimed that the situation had gotten worse. She turned around to leave, but looked at him one last time, saying she was going. Before closing the door, she heard a small word of concern from him. She wondered what to do now, then happily thought that Ao could talk without using honorifics. She wondered why Ao looked like that right now. So cute at home. Miyaki, lying in the middle of the futon, thought to himself that he felt he had done something wrong. I feel so tired. But in times like these, he always hated it because he often had nightmares. In the dream, a woman told him that the rumors of Ioba's affair were not spread by her. She says you are what everyone around you thinks you are. She suggests breaking up, saying they shouldn't waste each other's time anymore. She bluntly said there was no need to be clearer. And she doesn't need someone like you. Shiraishi then said she was home, entering her room holding her phone. Miyaki was still sleeping soundly. She asked him if he had been sleeping the whole time. Miyaki let out an annoyed sound. She mumbled that he was whining too much, and wondered if he was okay or if she should wake him up. She asked him if he had taken the medicine yet. Miyaki didn't answer, just whispered Nina's name. Shiraishi stopped, but then smiled mischievously and lay down next to him. She joked that he called her name and said it was Nina. She said today was special. Because she will be right next to you, said today was special. She wished him a speedy recovery, then completely placed her head on his futon next to the pillow. A speedy recovery. She gently lifted a few strands of sweaty hair from his forehead and thought that he was always kind. But that's because I'm Nina. What if she isn't Nina? Suddenly, he turned around and hugged her, placing her head on his chest. She called his name softly and wondered if he was sleeping. Her face began to turn red with embarrassment. She called him and tried to wake him up, but he only moved slightly, his arm still holding her. She thought everything was fine, until he passed out on top of her, pinning her under him. Later, while working, Miyaki wondered what he was doing while holding the broom. His manager stood right next to him, turned to ask if he was talking to her. He just replied that he was talking to himself. He thought for sure he was being avoided. He remembered the moment she stopped and said it was okay when he asked if she needed help. Then she said that she would eat alone today. He knew that since the day he had a fever, Nina had been acting very strange. He thought he slept all day and didn't really know what happened. He worriedly wondered if anything had happened while he was sleeping. He thought restlessly that he did not understand. His manager observed the worry in Miyaki's heart and asked if anything was wrong. When she said he might like someone, he turned to look at her. His cheeks turned red when she pointed out that he had cut his hair and changed his appearance. She said she thought it might be because of a girl, and asked if Miyaki had found a girl he liked in real life. He tried to deny it, but the manager continued to say that she knew he had received these tickets as a gift, but thought he should use them. She gave him 2 movie tickets and said she didn't watch this genre, but thought it was very popular with girls his age. She told him to do his best, then gave him the ticket before leaving, making him wonder if she liked the movie. After leaving the cinema, Shiraishi commented that the movie was actually quite interesting. She happily said that the scene at the end of the movie, when the shark and penguin combine, was amazing. He expressed joy because she liked it and realized she was interested in such things. She said that the theater owner was kind enough to give them those tickets. Miyaki thought that when he invited her, she came as usual. He guessed he had been worried for no reason about her avoiding him. When he walked right behind her, she suddenly turned around as if she had just remembered something, but then felt confused because they were standing too close to each other. She mumbled, "It's okay," and backed away. He felt worried, thinking she was deliberately staying away from him. As for Shiraishi, she thinks this situation is terrible because every time she was near Ao, her heart pounded. An annoyed voice rang out. Ask what they are doing. They turned around and saw Yaotome standing there with a frown on her face. Aicha Shiraishi smiled and said that he really came. Miyaki exclaimed in surprise, "You called him?" She replied that she told Yaotome she was going to the movies, and he said he would come. Miyaki pointed out that they had already finished watching the movie, but Shiraishi said that she really didn't think Yaotome would come. He texted her to ask if she was free today, and she said she was going to the movies with Usan. Then he said he would come along. She texted back that if he left now, maybe he'd be able to watch the movie in time. However, Yaotome bluntly says he doesn't care about the movie and asks why the two are here together. "Haven't you been staying at his house?" Miyaki opened his mouth to explain, but Shiraishi gently pulled Yaotome's hand and asked to speak with him privately. His eyes widened when he saw her big round eyes, and he blushed. He shouted, "What are you doing so suddenly?" But Nina thinks she's okay with Meikun and wondered why Aosan made her heart skip a beat. Shiraishi told himself that that wasn't what Usan wanted, and that what happened the other day was just an accident. She let go of Yaotome's grip and said, "Okay, thank you, that's enough." Yaotome asked angrily, "What just happened?" After that, she told them to wait here, then said she was going to look at the souvenirs from the movie. A moment of silence passed, and the atmosphere around Miyaki became tense and awkward. Yaotome was also silent for a while, then suddenly spoke up, asking Miyaki if he liked Shiraishi. Miyaki was surprised by this question, but Yaotome continued, "Otherwise, why are you hiding something from such a young girl?" Nina, from afar, thought about how she had been at Aosan's house these past few days, and wondered why I feel so worried now. She looked at her phone when the notification tone sounded, then frowned when she realized it was from her manager. Meanwhile, Miyaki began to answer, with Yaotome's words echoing in his head, asking if he liked Shiraishi. But immediately, Shiraishi appeared in front of him, held up the phone, and exclaimed that this was very bad. She said she just received a call from her manager at home. Miyaki quickly interrupted and asked Yaotome if he could talk here. Yaotome tilted her head in confusion, and when she looked at him, Nina realized he didn't know anything about her live stream. Nina looked at him in shock, then said they could discuss this later. Yaotome frowned deeper and asked, "What are you talking about?" He asked if she was hiding anything from him, then confirmed that Miyaki knew something. He continued asking, "Why does Miyaki know but I don't?" Nina muttered a small apology without daring to look at him. Yaotome turned away, saying firmly that he understood and would go home. She called after him, but he told her to talk to Miyaki as much as she wanted. He mumbled as he walked away, thinking he was the first person she called, and before there was only you. He remembered the days when they grew up together, muttering that he had been lonely before, and he should have been there. Miyagi quietly asked her if she should run after him. Nina said she would contact Yaotome later, and said he often did things like this. Putting that aside, she exclaimed that this situation was terrible. She explained that the office had called to say they were going to send something to Nina, and it looked like they had sent a letter.
Miyaki asked if that was something she needed to sign for. She replied that it wasn't, but she just didn't want anyone to see that letter.
She said she was running away from home, and getting the papers could cause trouble. She closed her eyes, sighed, and said she really didn't want to go home, but still have to go back to get the letter. However, she worries that Ao is only letting her stay because she can't go home, and she thought that if she came back, he wouldn't let her stay with him anymore. Miyaki, on the other hand, was worried when she realized that she really didn't want to go home. He put his hand on his chin and thought, perhaps her family treated her badly. The image of her tearful face appeared in his mind, and he thought that if she went back to get the letter and met her parents, what would happen? He asked if he should go with her to get the mail. She hesitated and asked again if he was going to come with her to the house, and then she would be able to come back to stay with him. He replied that she was right, but then realized that meant he would know where she lived. He said that on second thought, maybe he shouldn't go, but she said it was okay. And she wanted him to come with her. Then they stood in front of an apartment, and Miyaki realized that he was really here. Next to the elevator, he said he would wait outside. She asked what was the meaning of his coming here. And besides, she said she didn't think anyone was home. She pressed the elevator button. He asked if both of her parents worked. She replied that her father was working, but her mother. Then she said they weren't here, so it would be okay. They went to her door, and she said there was no one here and invited him in. Miyaki thought about entering Oshi's house, wondering if a fan like him was allowed to do so. She said she would go find the letter and told him to wait here. I agree. He realized he was quite worried. He asked if she lived with her father or if it was just the two of them together. She replied that yes, it was just the two of them because her mother had left. Then she exclaimed, "Found it, wonderful." She said the letter had not yet been opened. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind, causing her to stiffen. She turned around and saw her father standing at the door. She said she thought he had gone to work. He replied that he lived nearby, so he stopped by on his way home from work. He turned to look at Miyaki with suspicious eyes. His eyes did not change. Athena quickly stood in front of Miyaki and said that he was just a friend who happened to be with her when she stopped by the house. Her father didn't beat around the bush, but asked directly if he would take care of her when she left home. She bowed her head and confirmed. He said that after she left the house without permission,
Would she feel ashamed for bothering others?
Miyaki asked him to wait a moment, stepped out from behind her, and told her father that she wasn't bothering him. He asserted that it was he who asked her to stay at his house because she was alone in the dark and trying to fend for herself. However, the man said that he appreciated Miyaki's concern, but he was still certain that he could clearly understand his daughter's situation. He said that perhaps she forced him to agree to let her stay. Miyaki tried to deny, but her father continued that this had always been so. When things don't go her way, she will ignore her parents, even though she has never run away from home before. He said she was always looking for recognition and just wanted to attract the attention of others. He also said that she started doing meaningless things like live streaming, and the letter she received was also related to that. He said he told her to stop and couldn't believe that his daughter was involved in such nonsense. He added that she should not embarrass the family any further. However, Miyaki spoke up, saying he didn't think it was something shameful, and to call it meaningless or trivial is not right. Miyaki exclaimed that this was not the case, acting as someone else and creating live streams for everyone to enjoy. It's not easy at all. He asked her father if he thought she put a lot of passion and effort into what she did. You said that Nina has a lot of fans. Thousands of people watch her live streams, and that's awesome. Making many people laugh is not meaningless. He emphasized that it was the thought and effort she put into her live streams. It has helped save many lives. Therefore, he strongly asked her father to take back what he said. However, her father did not give in. On the contrary, he admitted that his words were somewhat rude. However, he said that this is a family matter, and it would be best for Miyaki to leave. Miyaki thinks he's right. But right behind him, Nina grabbed his shirt and asked if he was going. She said that if he went, she would go with him. Miyaki looked at her questioningly and said that since she had come all this way, she should talk to her father properly. But she replied that there was no point in talking to her father because he won't listen to what you want to say. That's why she left home. She said that all the time. He didn't listen to her mother, and that's why her mother left. She added that even though she couldn't stay with Ao, she would look for another place. She turned around, ready to leave, but Miyaki blocked her path and said she knew this wouldn't solve anything. She stubbornly said she would come back to him because you said so yourself. He turned to her father and said that the situation had come to this. He put the business card on the table and said this was his address and contact information. Her father asked him what he was going to say. Miyaki explained that he was just a complete stranger, and he understood that this might be a bit excessive. But he asked her father for permission to let Nina stay with him a little longer. He said that even if they talked right now for many reasons, he didn't think the conversation would have a good outcome. So he begged her father to give Nina a little more time and bowed for permission. Her father remained strict, but said he would record his contact information. He added that even if he stopped her, she would leave again. He admitted that compared to not knowing where she was, at least knowing that she was safe was better. He says this is definitely better. Miyaki thanked her father and promised that if anything happened, he would contact him immediately. Her father said everything was fine and he needed to go back to work. After that, he said there was no need to say anything more. Nina didn't look at him when he left, but when they left the house, she thanked Miyaki for saying those things to her father. She said that he must have been surprised because her reason for leaving home was really so trivial. He replied that she told him that she didn't get along with her parents, and now he understood the reason was because they were against her being a VTuber. She said it was just a normal argument between parents and children, then asked if that was why she should go home. Before she could say more, he interrupted her and said he didn't think so. He bent down to eye level with her, as if speaking to a child, and told Nina that things had never been easy for her. He said that all this time, she couldn't go home. Immediately, she burst into tears. She remembered her father saying that enough was enough, and her mother appearing as she told about the entrance ceremony. He told her not to waste time on such things. Your father is always like that, and her mother once said that since she entered high school, she can take care of herself. After that day, her mother never returned home again. Later, at school, Yao Tome asked her if she wanted to go somewhere after school. She replied with yes, but her eyes widened when she saw a poster promoting VTuber Niji live recruitment. She wasn't sure, but just wanted someone to see her. She wondered if being a VTuber would be okay. Her mother once asked if this was a suspicious company, but Nina said no. It's a famous company. Her mother agreed and said she would at least sign the application for her. Her mother said she didn't want her father to know that she still saw her. Nina replied that she understood, and her mother added that this would be the last time they would do this together. Later, her mother told her that her parents were officially divorced. Nina asks if that means her mother has decided on her custody yet, but her mother just told her to get along with her father. Nina could only sit there in shock. Then, during the live stream, Nina thanked viewers for coming to watch her broadcast today. Initially, her broadcasts were not favorable. She told viewers that she would be happy if they could tune in to the next broadcast. She secretly thought that today's broadcast was so bad, there was nothing she could say. After the broadcast ended, she read the comments. One person commented that she seemed more nervous than expected, even for her first live stream. Nina sighed, but was quickly delighted when she realized that she also received a lot of positive comments. She told herself she didn't care, But actually, she used to think that only big VTuber fans watched her. However, there are also people like this. When reading Aosun's comment, he said that this was the first time he watched such a broadcast. He supported her, sending a 500 yen donation, and told her to keep trying. She thanks him for finding her. When she saw that the number of subscribers had reached 682,000, she was happy that the number of followers was increasing. She told herself that maybe it was because today's broadcast was longer than last time. In the comments, Miyaki asked if Nina would live longer regularly. She thought she could only livestream when her father wasn't home, but since this was work and very common, she wondered if she should talk to her father. However, when she mentioned her father was just suspicious and said he knew she was doing something secret. He asked if she was planning to do this as the exam was approaching. He told her to only do such things after stepping out into society and becoming independent. He thought that children like her just wanted to be naughty, and she wouldn't understand. She mutters that this is work, and she was also paid by the company. But he said frankly that the work she was doing was just a short-term trend. He said this job wouldn't last forever. And when that job was gone, he asked her what would be left. He doubted whether, when that happened, she would be able to put this job on her resume. He was skeptical whether this job was something she could write in and get recognized for, and emphasized that the company and those who watch the live streams have no responsibility for her life. She tried to argue that there were a lot of people looking forward to her live streams, but her father replied that those people would quickly find a replacement, because it doesn't have to be you. In frustration, she hurried into her room, closed her suitcase, and angrily shouted, "Why is he always like that?" She told herself that she shouldn't say anything, and wondered why Dad wouldn't listen to her. Looking at her savings book, she thought it would be okay if she went out alone, since she already had quite a lot of savings. She decided to stay at an internet cafe for a while. She thinks the only way for her father to find her is through her live stream. Even though part of her understood what her father said, she still decided to leave. When arriving at the internet cafe, the staff returned her card and said that underage people were not allowed to stay after 10 p.m. Staff say high school students must be accompanied by an adult. She asked Nina if she understood. She scrolled through her phone and thought she didn't know the loan contract required written parental consent. Regarding her mother, she could not ask for help. Nina thinks she has a lot of followers, but none of them can help her in real life. Now, she understands that people love Amasaki Nina, but not the real Nina. Kata Takenoken comments that Nina definitely has a good relationship with her family, as he can sense it through her stories. She burst into tears, thinking that Nina really wasn't like the image of Nina that everyone knew. In the end, there was nothing, and she guessed that no one would find her. She read a few more comments, asking if there was any live stream. Another comment said that Nina didn't livestream today, but asked if anyone watched Akari's singing performance. That's when she realized Miyaki was looking at her, but she only saw Nina's keychain fall on the street. She picked it up and ran after Miyaki, thinking that he couldn't leave Nina here. She begged him. Tears are still flowing. Don't leave her behind. She gently patted his shoulder, thinking she was standing right in front of him, even though she is not the Nina he loves. She smiled, pointed to the keychain and said, "You dropped this." Nina thought that maybe someone could feel the same as her, but on that day, it was he who found her at the apartment. She burst into tears, saying that was the reason her mother divorced and left, and her father never listened to what she said. His eyes widened when he realized that he had made her cry. She grabbed his shirt, pulled gently, and asked if he was listening. He told himself that he wanted to hear her speak seriously, but when he looked down at her hand, holding his clothes, he worried that if anyone saw this scene, a little girl crying and a strange man who was not a resident of the neighborhood, it wouldn't be good. He suggested that they should go home and talk there. She agreed and gently apologized, said that she knew it was annoying that he had to hear everything, but he comforted her, saying it wasn't so. I really want to hear what Nina-san wants to say. That's why he advised her to go home. She looked at him intently, thinking that this was always the case. Even when he knew she was Nina, he still cared about her. She remembered when he said that it didn't change the fact that Nina was always special to him. Nina thought he tried his best to help her, and she remembered when he suggested that they should try to repair the relationship between her and her parents. Miyaki is someone who is willing to look for her. She gently said that she liked him. He was stunned for a moment, then said he didn't hear what she just said, and asked again. But she immediately said loudly that it was nothing, really nothing. She turned away and said they should go. He was still blushing. Realizing she wasn't following him, she repeated that it was nothing, then held his hand and asked if it could be like that, just a little more. The next morning, she wrote a message to the manager, wishing her a good morning and apologizing for disturbing her so early. She wrote that she was reaching out because she had a question to ask. A message bubble appeared when she asked if company policy prohibited VTubers from having relationships. She stared at the phone until she got an answer. The manager asked if Nina-san had found someone she liked. They wrote that the company certainly would not object, but reminded her to keep her private life separate from her image on air. The manager also wrote that it would not be good to restrict her too much because she has her own life. The company's policy always prioritizes the streamer's emotions. Nina immediately sat up, exclaiming if that was true. She thought they would say no. But now she realizes that liking Ao-san is completely okay. She realized it brightly and repeated that there was no problem as she liked Ao-san. Later, while Miyaki was on duty, standing in front of the staff room looking at his phone, the store owner called him. She asked him if something was wrong and asked again if he wasn't going to go home. He replied that he was just about to leave and asked if he should stay. She said loudly that there was no need and urged him to go home. She said there was a girl waiting for him in front of the store. He went outside and saw Nina standing there. She bid him a good morning. He asked if anything was wrong, and she replied that she just wanted to know if Alson was here, so she looked over at the counter. Another employee approached, and Nina told him to work the night shift. She asked, "Aren't there any women working here?" He replied that during the day there were, but at night it was almost all men. Her face lit up, making him worried and wondering what just happened. He thought that she had never been to his work before, maybe after the incident with her father. She was nervous about being alone. He wondered if she was still having trouble. Thinking that her father had entrusted her to his care, Miyaki felt responsible. He asked her if she wanted to go somewhere after her shift ended. She asked him if he was done with his shift and if it was for a change of pace. She replied that it was okay, but he suggested that since they hadn't spent much time at the cinema last time, if it would make her feel more comfortable, they should go. She exclaims that he is right, and they should go. In her mind, she thought this was a date. Nina apologized, saying she had left the house unlocked and didn't have the key with her. He replied that he also wanted to go home and change, so it was okay. Afterwards, they went to an aquarium together and stood watching the penguins. Nina excitedly exclaimed that they were so cute. He thought it was good that she was so happy. He turns to her and says she looks different today. She held her hair and said she woke up early and curled her hair. He said he didn't know if he should say this, but she really looked pretty with his hairstyle. However, he also said that her usual appearance is also very beautiful. She asked if this hairstyle would look better. He smiled and said he thought so. Her eyes filled with heart shapes at the thought of him finding her cute, even when she was just an ordinary person. She hesitantly asked if he wanted a girlfriend. He stopped, turned away, and quietly replied no. He said he hadn't thought much about it, but she countered that Ao-san loved Nina. She asked if he was dating the person behind Nina. She asked if that makes him happy. He shyly mentioned the person behind and asked if she was talking about herself. She exclaimed that yes, but then said it was just an example. She asked if he could go on a date with her. Would he? She looked at him, hoping to get an answer, but he wondered if he could date Nina. Finally, he replied that it was impossible. She asked why, and he replied that because Nina was still a minor. He said it wasn't a good thing for them to live together, even though her father had allowed it, and dating her is a completely different story. He sweat dropped as he waited for her reaction, but she just smiled and said she was glad he didn't hate her. She then added that she heard that adults and high school students can date as long as they both agree. She took out her phone and started searching for information. She opened an article titled, "Is dating between adults and young people a crime?" She started saying that what she just said was just an example, but now she wants to tell the truth. However, he interrupted and said that adults and teenagers are not the same, and that's not okay for many reasons. He affirmed that even if they agreed, he asked what the people around them would say. He said that people usually don't accept things like that, and even though she said it was consensual, I don't think anyone would believe that. Her eyes opened wide when remembering what he once told her, that there were rumors that he was a cheater, and even though he told the truth, no one believed him. She apologizes to you, said that she was very selfish and didn't think about his feelings right now. She bowed her head and admitted her mistake, then told him to forget what she had just asked and pretend she hadn't said anything. She holds his hand in hers and says that instead she will do everything properly and seriously. Nina asked him to let her speak one more time. When she turns 18, she will ask him again. She let go of his hand and apologized for holding his hand. He said it was okay and asked if she would be 18 this year. And is your birthday the same as Nina's? She replied, no. Her birthday is next month. He smiled, but inside he was panicking because that day was approaching. Meanwhile, Nina's father takes off his tie and says things are not okay. He said she told him she would be successful if she started a business. She even gave up her job to go with him. He told her to just wait a little longer, but she said this was a waste of time. She suggested breaking up, sighed, and said that if he had known so in advance, she chose Aoba. She looked at his photo on the phone. Nina mutters if going on a date is really necessary. She wondered if being friends would be a better choice. She said that she just liked being friends with him, which is what she told May. She said she has other things she wants to do right now, so she doesn't really want a boyfriend or anything. Yaotome wondered if it was really impossible and wished she could just say it. He asked if she had any plans tomorrow, and is your birthday tomorrow? He went on to ask if she did anything on her birthday every year. She didn't answer, just look at the phone with eyes full of affection. Meanwhile, the phone conversation continued. He asked her if she had a favorite type of cake, and she replied that she liked them all. He asked her to answer more clearly, and she said she had a plan. He looked up from the book and realized something. He exclaims that she had plans with someone else before. A flash of lightning flashed past him. When he saw her smile on the phone, with eyes full of love he had never received. Then, suddenly, she was pulled out of her reverie. She called May's name from behind, but realized that he was gone. Outside the schoolyard, with her bag on her back, Yaotome wondered what she was doing. He was so shocked that he unconsciously left school early. I think I will miss studying like this. Looking at the phone, he shouted that it was all Miyake's fault, and said that she was joking with him. He told himself that he should have reported her first, but now he couldn't do that anymore. The image of her smile appeared in his mind again. He decided to ignore this thought, thinking it was absurd. He had never seen her smile like that before, and realized it was the smile she gave to the person she liked. He wondered what could make a high school student happy. The clerk asked if she could help Miyake find something. He shyly said he was fine. The clerk asked if she could help Miyake find something. He shyly said he was fine. I remember that she said they would talk when she turned 18. And he knew next time he would have to answer her seriously. And Nina wondered if it would be okay to talk to him on her birthday. She worried it might make him feel embarrassed. And she didn't want to create a strange atmosphere on her birthday. She decided not to mention this tomorrow and think they should have fun instead of making things complicated. That's what she thought, at least. But now she wondered why things had become like that. When she was lying on top of Miyake, leaving him confused. She was confused. Don't understand what's going on. And Miyake also immediately realized that this was not a good thing. Initially, everything went well. Today is Nina-san's birthday, and they decided to hold it at home. He gave her a gift, and the choir said, "That's..." They both ate cake, but then suddenly, Nina-san started acting strangely. Her face turned red, and she suddenly jumped on him, leading to the current situation. He lay there, with Nina on top of him, wondering what was happening to her. He recalled similar scenes in the past, when he worked at his old company, attending drinking parties, and having to deal with drunk colleagues. He looked at the cake and suddenly thought about wine. The seller told him that the cake contained Western alcohol and warned him to be careful with children and people who cannot tolerate alcohol. Those words echoed in his head, and he realized that was the problem. He apologizes to Nina and says it's because he didn't think about this when buying the cake. But instead of listening to him, Nina disobeyed him and suddenly confessed that she loved him, while her dress slid down one shoulder. He was confused, not knowing what to do in this situation. He turned his head away, thinking that this was what people often said when they were they were drunk. Even though she is 18 years old, she is still just a high school student. Nina repeated her confession and asked him to answer like an adult. She said that before they couldn't date because she was still a minor, but now she asked him to answer frankly. She asks how he feels about her, urgently asked him to express his feelings. He started to think about his feelings, but suddenly Nina whispered that she felt tired, and then fell asleep on him. He asked in surprise if she had just said she was sleepy. She replied that she couldn't sleep at all last night for unknown reasons, but she was so excited about tomorrow that she couldn't sleep. He told her that That's that if she wanted to sleep, she should lie on the futon. Miyaki breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Nina was finally asleep, while she snored softly on top of him. He thinks I love you is an easy thing to say, but maybe she doesn't really realize it yet. The next morning, Nina woke up with messy hair. She doesn't remember anything after eating that cake, and wondered why Ao-san curled up sleeping in the corner of the room like that, when I saw you curled up in a blanket in the corner of the room. She wondered why he didn't sleep on the futon with her. Quietly, she sat down next to him and leaned her head against the wall. She thought that yesterday was her birthday, and gently rested her head on his shoulder. But suddenly, there was a knock on the door that startled her. She wondered if it was the game she ordered yesterday. If it's right, you can go out and get it. However, when opened, she saw Naki standing there. Nina realized it wasn't the delivery person, and she started thinking in panic who this person was. But before she could think any further, the woman in front of her spoke up, mocking her. Such a young girl! Maybe his interests have changed? The woman continued, I know he was abandoned by an older woman, but is this too much? Miyaki suddenly appeared from behind the door, facing the woman's mocking smile with an expression filled with unresolved pain. Long time no see, she said, and he calmly asked why she appeared after so much time. He insisted that they had nothing to say to each other. She told him not to be so cold. She started to mention their past, but Miyaki interrupted, asking her to wait a moment. He said they shouldn't talk about those things here. Nina looked at him worriedly. Miyaki slammed the door in the woman's face, saying he would be out soon. He went back inside, apologized to Nina, and said he would go out for a moment. He said there was cake from yesterday in the refrigerator, and if you're hungry, you can eat. Miyaki was about to step out, but suddenly felt a hand pulling his shirt from behind. He turned around, only to face Nina's worried eyes. She let go of his shirt and apologized, saying it was nothing. Before leaving, he gently said that he would return as soon as possible. Nina thought about the woman who had just appeared, telling herself that there was no mistake. That's his ex-girlfriend. She panicked when she thought that that was the type of guy Usan liked. Black bob hair, very mature appearance, simple but elegant clothes. She compared herself and realized she was completely different. She is Nina, with long dyed brown hair and fashionable clothes. Still just a high school student. Nina frowned deeply. She hugged her pillow tightly, thinking in despair that perhaps his preferences had changed a long time ago. She remembered what he said, that a lot of things happened when he and that girl broke up, and it was really difficult. But then she also remembered that he said he was abandoned, which caused him to quit his job. Nina stopped complaining and thought it meant he used to love that person very much. She wondered with wet eyes if he still loved that person. She silently asked if he was thinking about getting back together with her. She buried her face in the pillow, sobbing, wondering why that woman had appeared right now. At the family restaurant, Naki asked if the girl was his girlfriend, and commented that she looked quite young. He was evasive and did not answer directly. He asked her again why she came here today. She laughed and asked, Aren't you going to answer my question? She said that the age difference is not an issue if both parties agree. However, she advised him not to take this too seriously, and emphasized that at his age, his peers are still just children. She went on to say that older men can be very attractive, but asked what if that changed. Miyaki interrupted her with a serious tone, affirming that he understood all of that, but Naki only looked at him with even more contempt. He further explained that due to certain circumstances, that girl is currently under his care. Naki laughed and suddenly asked, So why don't we try again? She suggested that he and she should get back together, smirked. Miyaki was surprised as if he had just been struck by lightning. He remembered that night when she called his name. Looking slightly annoyed and asked if he was listening, he laughed and replied that he was listening, and said that she had heard from her father. She replied that he had been talking about marriage for a while. She tells Aoba that she told her father that she has a boyfriend who is on the path to success, and he asks when he will go out. Aoba asks if she really said that about him. She insisted that it was okay because it was the truth, but also said that Aoba doesn't like this. She asked why he didn't come and introduce himself to her parents, because at her age, she really needs to think about marriage. She also said that Aoba was young, so she didn't pay attention to it. He lovingly replied that if she wanted it, he would do it. She smiled and replied that of course she wanted to. I really loved Naki-chan's smile. and he actually went to meet her parents because he wanted to do everything for her. He tries his best at work. But then one day, Naki asked him how long he would live in this apartment. He replied that living here is not bad. The rent is cheap, so he can save more. He said he would move within a year, when they could afford it. She agreed without concern, then asked if he planned to stay at the company forever. She said that some people quit their jobs and start their own businesses, and asked if he had ever thought about that. He replied that he had never thought about it, and said that he was satisfied with his current job. She said it was something Oba often did. Later, when he worked late, he realized he hadn't had much time to spend with Naki-chan lately. He wondered if she wasn't going to work today. In the text message, he texted her, saying he heard she missed work and asked if anything happened. She replied that she had a slight fever this morning. He worriedly asked if she was okay and if he should stop by when he got off work. She wrote that it was okay. The fever had gone down. She told him he was tired and didn't need to come visit. He wondered in his heart if that was really okay. Naki-chan's refrigerator is always full of alcohol, and he thought he should at least bring her some food. When he rang the doorbell, it wasn't Naki, but another man who opened the door, looking just as surprised as him. A cold feeling enveloped Miyaki when he saw Naki sitting still on the bed, her clothes barely covering her body. Later, at the coffee shop, she asked him if he was serious, and said he couldn't continue like this forever. She says Aoba may find this okay, but she doesn't, and she wants to break up. She asked him if he sees anything wrong with being betrayed. She wondered why he did that, and asks if he's saying he still loves her. Presently, he sat silently in front of her, his back hunched, as she begged him for another chance at their relationship. He hesitated, then told her he couldn't. He said he couldn't start over with Naki-chan, and that there was nothing more he could do for her. Furthermore, he currently only works a part-time job, and he doesn't think he can meet her expectations. Naki scrolled through her phone and smiled, saying she was sure Aoba would find a new job soon. She said she knew someone who was looking for a systems engineer and introduced Aoba to that person who really wanted him to meet. Aoba apologized again, causing Naki to stop for a moment, surprised. Then she said she had only one request. She explained that her parents were unhappy when they found out they were breaking up, especially since he had met him and everything seemed fine. She said her parents thought they were going to get married, but then he broke up with her. So she asked him to meet her parents again and explain everything. Aoba tried to argue, asking why he had to do that, but Naki clapped her hands to interrupt him and said that she knew he would say that, thanking him in advance. She stood up and said she would contact him about the date and time. When Aoba tried to tell her to wait a moment, she placed a bill on the table, promised to see him again soon, and left. Aoba stared at the empty chair in front of him, then bowed, holding his head in his hands. He mumbled that he was tired and wondered what I was doing. He knew he shouldn't have needed to talk to Naki. He could have come up with a good reason to break up with her. If he did that, Nina-san would definitely not look at him with those eyes. He looked back at where he had been sitting and thought. While talking to Naki-chan, his mind kept thinking about Nina. He thought back and found it easy to understand when he thought about Nina. At home, Nina hugged her pillow tightly and jumped up when he heard the doorbell ring. She went to open the door and saw him walk in, and I'm sorry for being late. The expression of relief on her face was indescribable as she welcomed him home. She said she thought he would want more cake, then walked ahead of him and said that she hadn't eaten yet, so why don't we eat cake together? He replied that he would eat with her, but his eyes secretly looked at Nina's poster. She clutched the key in her hand and asked if this was a copy. She turned around and asked him if she could keep it. He replied she could, adding that he knew not having the key would inconvenience her. He also said that he intended to give it to her yesterday, but didn't have time. She finished the sentence for him, saying that she had fallen asleep first. She said she only remembered eating the cake. He was almost about to say something, but she asked if he was going to say anything. He quickly replied that it was nothing special. He thought she didn't remember her confession. He remembered her face when she confessed her feelings to him. Nina hesitantly started talking about the girl from before, and he replied that it was the person he used to date. That's all. He insisted that there was nothing left between them now. Then he was silent again, saying it was nothing. Then stood up and said he was going to wash the dishes. She silently watched him leave, then sat down on his pillow. Her face turned red. He stood in front of the sink, wondering what was happening to him. At school, a boy told Nina that he had been interested in her for a long time. Another boy said the whole class was about to graduate, and now it's time to make memories together. Another boy shyly said that he would be happy if he could be her friend and get to know her better. Nina, confused, asks if this is a punishment game. The boy looked confused, but she continued saying that this was the third time that day she had heard the same thing. The boy blushed and admitted that although he had noticed her for a long time, but she is always with her boyfriend in class. Nina thought of May, while the boy in front of her explained that that was the reason why it was difficult for him to approach her. May texted her that he wouldn't be coming today because he had to meet a classmate and wouldn't be able to come home with her for a while. Nina realized she hadn't been around May much lately. The boy in front of him waved his hand awkwardly, saying that he didn't mean to confess anything. He just hoped they could be friends. Nina smiled and replied that if they were just friends, there would be no problem. The boy smiled and asked her if she knew about the upcoming fireworks show. She looked at the boy curiously, and he thought to himself that he seemed successful. He said that the fireworks show will take place on the first Sunday of summer vacation. Nina exclaimed that it was next week and smiled. It felt like the fireworks show was coming sooner than she thought. He suggested they change their contact information, but Nina thanked her and left, making him confused as he looked at the empty space in front of him. At home, Miyaki is talking on the phone with Naki. He said he didn't like this. And you never said where you were going. He asked if this was the last time, then agreed if it was. He asked about the time and learned that the appointment would be next Sunday. Nina happily returned home, shouting that she had arrived, and excitedly suggested that they go see the fireworks together. Miyaki replied that he would go with her, but asked when the fireworks show would take place. Nina replied that it was next Sunday, causing him to pause for a moment and think, next Sunday, what a coincidence. Nina saw that he was silent and immediately asked if he had any other plans. But Miyaki replied that it was okay. He would change the plan for not being in a hurry. Nina frankly asked if that day was a date with the woman he met yesterday. Miyaki didn't answer. She bowed her head and said it was okay. She says he promised her before, and she was sure there would be many more fireworks shows they could go to together. She says it's not his fault. Suddenly, he hugged her shoulders and shouted that she was wrong. Miyaki said that he didn't think he would see that woman again, but promised that this would be the last time. And he emphasized that the date was not important and he really wanted to go see the fireworks with Nina. Then he let go of her shoulder and apologized. But Nina took his hand, clasping their fingers. He looked at his hands and blushed. She asked if he had to go on a business trip that day. He confirmed that was the correct plan. Nina replied that they would meet at the fireworks show after he finished work, and she will wait for you. She went on to say that on the day of the fireworks show, she would tell him something. Then rested her head on his chest, asking if he could answer her seriously. Meanwhile, Yaotome is with friends. One of the group suggested that they go see the fireworks show next week. Another person wondered if it was just boys. Another person suggested inviting a girl. Then they turned to ask Yaotome, that day, do you have any plans? Eyes still glued to the phone, he replied that he would go, because he was free. The group started discussing which girl to invite. One person joked that if Yaotome participated, there might not be a need to invite anyone else. But in my heart, Yaotome thought he would rather go with someone he really liked. During a meeting with Naki's parents, her father said that there would be a fireworks show in this area tonight. During a meeting with Naki's parents, her father said that there would be a fireworks show in this area tonight. Her mother replied that it was a pity, and her father said that it had been a long time since they had been able to see each other like this. He continued, saying he was surprised when his daughter told him he suddenly broke up with her. Sorry about that. And admitted that he had not informed them both in advance. Naki's mother smiled and said it was okay. She felt happy to see that the two had reconciled. He looked at her with suspicion, but she didn't seem to notice. She went on to ask that there must have been many misunderstandings before, right? She expressed her joy at having the opportunity to resolve those misunderstandings. She said their daughter was old enough to start thinking about marriage, and she felt very reassured when she heard that. Two people will get married. He looked at Naki, but she deliberately avoided his eyes.